Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the 1969 Chevelle SS396. It's a 125 scale kit from Revell, number 85-4492. Now, the 69 Chevelle was the second year body style for that vehicle, which was considered a mid-size car back then. And it was available with a lot of trim and drivetrain options, but the SS396 was the most desirable and collectible, as it turns out, of all of them. Now, issued in 2020, this is the first issue of this kit, which borrows heavily on the brand new mold for the 68 Chevelle that came out a couple years ago. It's molded in 125 parts of white, clear red, and chrome, and it's a skill level 5 kit for advanced builders and has solid vinyl pad printed tires. It also features a single version with a pair of optional wheels, so there won't be too many extra parts. Now, it also has some nice water slide decals, and when you're done, the kit will be about 7 3/4 inches long, 3 inches wide, and just over 2 inches high. Oh, I hear Newt, our program director behind me, tapping on the glass. It looks like he's got a question here. Come on in, Newt. What is it?
That's a pretty clean looking model. I like the color. Isn't that what they called a muscle car?
You're absolutely right, Newt. This is what's called a muscle car. It's one of the best examples from that era. And you know, the muscle cars generally are ascribed to the beginning with the 63 GTO, but they were basically lightweight cars with big engines that young people could afford. However, more and more creature comforts creeped into the builds, and this SS396 was just a beautiful, comfortable, and powerful car. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, they're cleanly molded on separate trees for the major components. A nice clear set of windows, red taillights, and some black tires there. Now, we'll be using slow setting tube glue for most of the construction, but occasionally some super glue for fragile parts or white glue for the windows. But make sure you heed the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines for any of the products that you see or hear used in the review. Are the decals for the kit. You can see that there's pads there for under the hood and seat belts, etc. A little extra on this decal sheet. For those long stripes, you'll probably want to use some setting solution to make sure they conform to the contours of the body and settle into the panel lines. Construction starts with the engine, so go ahead and pull all of these pieces out for engine construction, and we'll begin by painting the engine halves Chevy orange and the transmission aluminum with the side cover painted steel. Now glue the two halves together, and now add the cylinder heads, the intake manifold, oil pan to the block, and paint those the Chevy engine orange. And when that dries, give the carburetor a gold tint and glue that to the intake on top there. Paint the water pump Chevy orange and the exhaust manifold steel. Paint the oil filter a blue color, and then glue these parts to the engine along with the valve covers, which are left chrome. And now paint the alternator and the fan clutch aluminum, the fan, the power steering pump, and the pulleys semi-gloss black. And then the fan belts are flat black. Now the bracket on the alternator is painted semi-gloss black, and assemble all these parts to the front of the engine. The coil and distributor cap are painted semi-gloss black with the base of the distributor in aluminum color. Now glue these parts to the intake manifold. And then paint the starter a semi-gloss black with the ends aluminum and the solenoid gold. Paint the fuel pump aluminum. When dry, glue these pieces to the right side of the engine. Now here's the right side of the completed engine. The air cleaner will get put on, later after the engine's in the car. There's also a decal that you see here on the valve cover on the right side of the engine, up front there towards the front. So that goes into place now too. There's also a decal on the fan belt and the decal on the alternator where the parting seam is. Now here's the rear of the completed engine, and we'll show you the left side, and there's a decal on the oil filter there, and there's a front view of the completed engine, and what a nicely detailed engine this is for a 125 scale car. Paint the chassis black and the transmission cross member a semi-gloss black, and then paint the steering box and its shaft steel. Now assemble the chassis by gluing 3 pieces together there, and by the way, there'll be instructions at the end of the review if you need further clarification. And next we're going to add the engine to the chassis. Now look for the mounting points and scrape any of the paint, or also remember to scrape any chrome from pieces that you're going to glue together. And now we'll assemble the console for the interior and paint that semi-gloss black, and put the assemble the 2 pieces there together, and paint the courtesy light on the back of the console white, the plate on the upper part of the console is aluminum, and the trim on the console is chrome, and use a chrome pen for that. Now paint the shifter boot a flat black, as well as the shifter ball, which is gloss black. You might not notice it at first, but there's some script there on the inside or on one of the fender wells, and you can sand that off to clean it up so it's not viewable. And there's also some script in the rear axle well there. You can see it highlighted a little bit. You can go ahead and sand that off as well. After you've removed the script from those wells, go ahead and give your chassis pan a nice coat of flat black. And once that dries, we're going to paint the seat parchment color with a flat black package shelf, and then apply the seat belt decals. Now paint the pedals flat black with some chrome trim, and then paint the washer tank white with a black lid. And now you can go ahead and glue the driver's pedals, the console, and the rear seat into position. I'll work on the seats here. You see the front and rear halves of the seats, and we're going to paint those a parchment as well. That's the color that I chose for the seats, and by the way, I'm using a brand called One Shot Paint. Now I'm trying to match OEM colors for the interior here, as well as we'll do the outside, but this parchment color I made using a blend of One Shot White L101 and some metallic gold L109. So I mix those together and use the airbrush to spray them. When that dries, you can paint the seat back release buttons chrome, and then glue the front and back halves together. And there's some decals for the seat belts, but on the 69, the Chevelle started using retractable front seat belts, so you wouldn't see them. So I left those out. Now we'll paint the door panels parchment with some semi-gloss kick panels when they're dry, and paint the door panel detail with some chrome paint. Locate your gluing points and go ahead and place those door panels and the front seats into position. The interior mostly done. We're going to get out the parts for the firewall and paint that flat black with a semi-gloss heater box. Now paint the wiper motors a semi-gloss black and steel, and the brake booster is a gold tone, and then paint the master cylinder steel with a gold top and silver hold down straps. Now glue these pieces together and into place. Next, get out the pieces for the dashboard and paint the dash semi-gloss black with a flat black insert. And there's no gauge detail molded in, so we'll use gauge decals. Now paint the trim on the dash a chrome, and the steering wheel a semi-gloss black, and apply the decal to the center of the wheel for that. Now paint the steering column flat black, and the turn signal lever and ignition wire switches are chrome. Now here's the completed dash, and go ahead and put it all together, and then we'll assemble it into the place in the interior bucket in the slots provided. We'll locate and glue the previously assembled firewall into place, and paint the battery a flat black with the terminals aluminum, and paint the caps a yellow color. Now there's a decal for the Delco on the top of the battery. but there's enough lettering molded in to the tops of the lettering. You can just scrape that off if you want to. Now we can work on the front suspension. We're going to paint the front suspension a semi-gloss black with the tiered and the sway bars there. They're painted steel color. Now paint the springs a flat black with steel painted on the raised area to highlight that. Now go ahead and glue the chassis to the floor pan. There's locating points to put some glue in there before you mate those together. And I fogged a little body color over the black on the underside to make it look like a little overspray from the factory. And now paint the gas tank there silver with some steel straps. And now get out the exhaust pipes there. We're going to paint those as steel color with the mufflers aluminum, and locate those holes, mounting holes on the bottom of the chassis there, and glue that into position up into the manifold, exhaust manifolds at the other end on the left and right sides. Now locate the parts for the rear end, and we're going to paint those semi-gloss black with the sway bar and the raised area on the springs highlighted steel color. Now assemble the rear end parts together, and once that is dried, locate your gluing points, remove any paint, and glue that into position on the rear end of the car. Now the drive shaft is painted steel and the shocks are a yellow color. Next, glue the shocks there and the drive shaft into place, and you can see note the yellow paint on the front A-arms. Now this is actually the bottom of the front shocks that were painted yellow to match the rears. Now the wheels, the tires for the wheels have nice tread detail, and they're solid, so they're pretty nice for this model. The sidewall lettering is pad printed in place, which is different for Revell kits, and so they look great when they're done. Now the wheel halves need to be pushed in the front and the rear, and I chose the SS wheels, but there are optional rally wheels. Now paint between the spokes a flat black, and then the spokes are silver. The center caps, outer rings, and the lug nuts stay chrome. So paint the backs of the rears black with silver rims, and then paint the fronts of the rears steel. So paint the backs of the front steel with the silver rims too, and then paint the fronts of the fronts a silver color. Slip all the stubs through the wheel backs from the inside, and then glue the fronts and backs together to sandwich the tire. And now you can add the completed wheel and tire assemblies to the chassis by putting those on the spindles. And if you don't want the model to roll, just glue them between at least one of the wheel backs and the suspension. But normally you can, if you want, you can just snap them into place over the axle stubs to continue to rotate. Now the radiator core support, the radiator, and the fan shroud are painted and ready to install. That's a kind of a semi-gloss black on the other parts than the radiator itself. And also note there's a decal on top of the fan shroud that goes there. The upper and lower radiator hoses are painted. They get painted a flat black, and there's a little bit of Chevy orange there on the manifold piece. So that thermostat housing gets the same treatment as the engine. Now after painting the hoses black, paint the hose clamp detail a silver color. Now glue the lower radiator hose in place before you glue the core support into position. And then the upper hose is glued into place after the core support is added and attached to the engine. The black lines here will highlight the parting lines that are on the body that should be removed by lightly sanding those off. And it has some very minor parting lines which are easily removed, so go ahead and take care of that and clean those up now. We'll deviate a little bit at this point from instructions and go ahead and include these these quarter extensions, which give us the 1969 motif from differentiating from the 68, which is how they built this model to include both, even though they're about 3 years apart. So go ahead and take care of those issues, but glue them into position so that we can paint them with the body. And then I use the rear bumper temporarily just to line up the quarter extensions to make sure they were properly positioned. And so here's the model with the quarter extensions in place, so we can paint the whole unit as one. After the parting lines were removed, I gave the body a nice coat of medium gray primer, and then I gave it a light sanding. And I'm going to use a factory OEM color called burnished brown. So I used the one-shot medium brown L116 and a one-shot brand black L199 with a little bit touch of metallic gold L109 to mix the paint to get it to look like the OEM color. So then I used an airbrush and top coated the body later with some Model Master High Gloss clear spray. Once the exterior paint is dry, we can turn the model over, and we're going to glue the windows and the backlight into place at this time with some white glue. You can also use crystal clear. And I used chrome paint around the windows and the area where the wiper set on the top of the cowl to highlight that. I painted the sun visors parchment along with the headliner, and I used chrome paint in the middle of the sun visors where the rear view mirror would be attached. Then paint the top of the cowl and the radiator flat black. Okay, now look for your gluing points and scrape any paint, and we're going to attach the body to the chassis at this time. So go ahead and look for those points, put some glue there, and then hold it together till she sets. These front end parts out and paint the front filler panel body color, and then paint the grille flat black with the highlights left chrome. Again, scrape any plating or glue from your glue points and go ahead and install that grille into the body. Locate those parking light lenses, and they get painted transparent orange, and they're glued to the front of the bumper there. The license plate mount then is glued to the center of the bumper, and the license plate decal can be applied. Just cut that out of the decal sheet and use some white glue to install it. And now is the time to go ahead and add that air cleaner into place. You can glue that on after painting the filter element a flat white color. And there's some decals for both the upper radiator hoses and the air cleaner's top. At the back end, we're going to work on the center section of the rear bumper. That's flat black, and you can either use the supplied decals or just paint that. And parts 132 and 133 need a small spot of white paint for the reverse lights in the middle of the lens. Again, remove any chrome and paint from your gluing points and go ahead and install the lenses into the bumper and the entire rear bumper with the license plates onto the back of the car. Now we're going to mask off the hood there, the top of the hood, and we're going to paint the bottom a flat black and then install the decals there for the insulation. Hood hinges get painted a flat black and glued to the hood, but they act as a latching mechanism, but it won't stay up on its own, so use a prop rod like this toothpick if you need one to display the engine, or glue it into position open. Now for the rest of the body, we're going to add those decals and side stripes. Remember to use plenty of warm water and maybe some setting solution for those. And we're also going to install the exterior mirrors at this time. So once again, this is a single-purpose kit, one design, and you're going to have some different wheels. You'll have two sets of wheels, and these are all the parts that I had left. And so there you have it. Your model's complete, and this gorgeous example of a 69 is probably the most accurate representation yet. So if you want something that's kind of special, go ahead and get one of these to commemorate old times, or in this case, a friend of mine's who had a car just like this. And if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium scale model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the icon in the lower right hand corner of any of our reviews. You could also find us on Facebook or our website, rideonreplicas.com. Thanks!